Welcome. I know this is going to be a small and personal crowd, which is great. Thank you for coming today. I have the special honor to introduce our guest from Northwestern University, who, as you know, is visiting us. It's Dr. Kemi Jona. He comes from wearing a couple different hats. He is a professor of computer science, specializing in learning sciences, and has also the founder and director for Northwestern's Office for STEM Education Partnerships, OSEP, which is, has a similar role and place at Northwestern as STEM Core. I'm Brian Rebar, as you probably know, who running as the associate director for our Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math careers through Outreach, Research, and Education Center, sort of the counterpart to OSEP. And so I've invited Kemi to join us today to share his perspective on a little further down the road on how their center has grown and made partnerships with the K-12 community and with in partnership with industry. And so we hopefully can learn some insights on how to move forward. Their center is now, was founded in 2006, and so has grown over time, and I think you'll hear some perspectives on some of the unique partnerships that they've forged through the Chicagoland area, and how we can, and how it's worked in that landscape. I know we've got to think about our own landscape, but because this is a small crowd, I think there'll be some chances for some questions. So please start thinking of questions that you have and perspectives you'd like to get insight on. I'm going to have you share who you are and what your affiliation is, and it also, you might, if you want to add anything that you hope to learn today, would be a nice added component. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Go for it, Robin.
I'm Robin Anderson. I'm the education coordinator at the Museum of Natural and Cultural History here on campus, and I'm just hoping to learn more.
All right. Andy Bedingfield, Director of Outreach and Education at the Center for Sustainable Materials Chemistry, and I would love to learn what you've done at Northwestern.
Great. Jeff Paulson, the College of Arts and Sciences Dean's Office.
Kim Finch, the Director of STEM for Fort J School District, the Eugene District.
Great.
And I'm Molly LaJoy. I'm the Executive Director of the Eugene Education Foundation.
And I'm Kay Fullerton, and I am the grant writer for Eugene Fort J and have been involved in a lot of these STEM collaborative projects.
Oh, terrific. All right. Well, again, I mean, because it's such a small group, it probably doesn't make sense to follow the normal kind of presentation script. And so, you know, I hope we can just make it, you know, as conversational as we need to be. And we have obviously both university and K-12 and museum folks. So, you know, whatever direction we need it to go, I think we probably could. So let me just tell you a little bit about kind of the office and how we kind of came to be, and then we can dive into some of the specific examples. So the mission that we have is to kind of serve as that one-stop shop for the outside community. You know, a university is really a complex organization, and if you're not, even when you're in the university, it's hard to know who to go talk to, but certainly if you're coming from a school or a district, it's almost completely impenetrable to figure out how to find the people that you need. And so our mission is to really do the job of connecting the resources of our university as best we can to that. That doesn't mean that everybody has to come through us, because it's a university and you can't force people to do stuff that they don't want, especially faculty members. But to the extent that we're able to be that one-stop shop, if we don't have something, we'll try to be the inside resource to go hunt it down for you. So we field lots of inquiries from a teacher who says, I'm doing a unit on X, Y, or Z. Is anything going on at the university? You know, can a grad student come out and help or something like that? And we'll just try to hunt it down if we don't have something. So we try to, you know, be a concierge service, if you will, for that. So let me just tell you a little bit about us. As Brian said, we were started in 2006. We are actually, unlike Brian's office, we're housed in the School of Education, although we get support from our Vice President for Research's office, and we serve really mostly the faculty from outside the School of Education who want to do STEM education work, but are physicists or chemists and don't really have the expertise in STEM education particularly. So bringing together the scientific expertise or engineering expertise, because we have a big school of engineering, as well as the education piece. So we have 12 people and plus me, so 13. These are former teachers who now work with me, or sometimes PhDs who decided not to go into science or bench science and really more passionate about education. And so we have, a molecular biology PhD and a chemistry PhD, but who are really passionate about working with kids and stuff. And these people go into the classrooms and work with the teachers. So it's a really often a terrific resource if you're a high school or middle school chemistry teacher to have a recently minted PhD in chemistry from Northwestern who can come and help you do your lessons or do a lab or something like that. The kinds of work that we do really are around sort of translating the cutting edge research that's happening at the university into a form that can work in a K-12 classroom or in an after-school setting, depending on what the program is. And that translation function is pretty complicated at times because you have to know a lot both about the science, but also about what does it mean to actually make it work for teachers or in a summer camp or in an after-school program. And so our work really spans kind of three main areas: teacher professional development. We do develop new modules and activities, not really full year textbooks and anything at that magnitude, but day long or week long or maybe a unit, as well as technology. And we also do some capacity building, which is kind of a third bucket, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that, that is above the level of an individual professional development type program. And we do, as I'll talk about in a minute, we do a lot of collaboration, not just with schools and partnership building, but with youth-serving organizations, museums, planetariums, whoever else is aligned with STEM education, school districts and whatnot. So this is kind of like your takeaway picture of what we do, right? We sit kind of at the middle here between the world of like the university, industry partners, community organizations if they need it, and sort of the K-12 serving community. And we sort of serve this bi-directional function. The old way of doing outreach at universities was kind of just throw it over the wall. This is cutting edge science, so every teacher would definitely appreciate this in his or her classroom. What else is there to the story? And to create sort of this bi-directional conversation. So in addition to providing whatever resources, we also have a lot of conversations with schools and teachers about what their needs are, what are they struggling with, where are the areas where there's some gaps in what they're trying to do, either with their strategy or bringing teachers into, say, next generation science standards or whatever the conversation is. And I'll show some examples of some ideas that we're working on now that actually came out of ideas that we heard from schools and districts that weren't stuff that we were even on our radar screen, and that we just responded to and went after some funding, got some funding, and built out a program that really answered directly something that we were hearing in school. So it's not always this, great university with lots of great ideas, take our stuff and be happy, but to really try to listen as much as we talk, so to speak. So that's kind of our picture of where we live, and doing that kind of back and forth translation of here's what we need, how do we find it, and there's a lot of stuff that people who don't understand universities expect from universities, like that they're sitting on bags of money and can spend money willy-nilly on anything, and it turns out, well, that's not really true, but there are some things we can do, like we can get undergrads to do a lot of stuff for you for free, and sometimes grad students, but we can't go and buy you a whole set of lab equipment, often, and so helping figure out what we can and can't do is a big thing. So let me just talk a little bit about some of the curriculum development work that we're doing. I'll give you some specific examples, and I also have a bunch of flyers if you want afterwards. If anything looks particularly interesting and you want more detail about it, there's some flyers you can grab, and there's usually a URL or something that you can go check it out on our website. And so we have two kind of different models. The first model was just helping faculty in the sciences or engineering do some outreach projects associated with whatever their research was. And then our new model is where we also have some projects of our own that we kind of think up and develop them, and sometimes we'll bring the faculty in to help us do those projects. So it may not be clear on the outside which is which, but it's just two different ways that we've kind of thought of different projects. And I'll give you some examples of that. So just real quickly, and again, there's a lot of flyers here, but we have 11, I think this is out of date, it's probably up to 12. Lots of different kind of STEM curriculum and resource programs. Things like watershed dynamics, which is sort of environmental science, computational thinking, climate change. So lots of different things in different areas. We're not as strong on the math part of STEM, for sure. So we tend to be much more into the S part of STEM, a little bit in the T part of STEM, and not as much in the E part of STEM. So it's not even. But over time, what we've done is we've ended up developing this network of school partnerships all over the Chicagoland area. Both the red dots are like the city schools, the Chicago public schools, and the purple dots are suburban schools. And over that time, we've had the opportunity to serve north of 600 teachers, around professional development. Those teachers reach or impact, almost 50,000 students. And roughly half are in the CPS public school system. As I was saying, the partnership work that we do isn't just with schools, but with other industry partners and funders, both big companies that you may have heard of and little companies that are local to the university that you probably haven't heard of. And oftentimes this means that they're investing in STEM education. And we'll apply for funding from them and then create some programs for kids as well. I'll give you some examples of this later. We also forge a lot of partnerships with state and local government. So I know here in Oregon there's some new efforts around creating some STEM networks and resource centers. We have something similar in Illinois called Illinois Pathways, which is funded through our Race to the Top money. And has created what we call STEM learning exchanges in different kind of workforce areas. So like agriculture, transportation, IT. We're part of the research and development exchange, which is mostly like universities and R&D intensive. Like pharmaceutical companies are doing a lot of R&D, so that would be in there. And that's a way to kind of aggregate. It's a different way of slicing the network work that happens, but they've done a nice job of recruiting industry in that sector who are interested in supporting kind of the whole pipeline, K through 12, 2-year and 4-year colleges, workforce training, the whole kind of pipeline into that particular career. One of the strongest ones in our area is manufacturing, because there's a lot of manufacturing that's kind of resurging now in the Chicago area. And so a lot of sort of certifying and training kids on, you might want to go to, if you're not going to 4-year school, you might want to go to a community college. You can also get these industry certifications and you can go be employable if, a lot of kids have to work as they, when they go through school. And this is a great way to get a really high paying job if you're going to continue your education. And then for the museum person in the room, there's a lot of, museums and other youth-serving organizations that we work with too. So in terms of here's a couple examples of some of our in-class. So one of the projects is called New Bio, Northwestern University Biology Investigations and Oncofertility. And this came about with a partnership with one of our faculty in the medical school who was doing some really inventive and innovative work around preserving the fertility of cancer patients. As you know, when you go through chemo or radiation, that can be very adverse in terms of your ability to have children later on. And so her research is around how do we help both men and women preserve their ability to have kids when they survive their cancer treatment, which nowadays most people, in fact, do survive and live on afterwards. And so we created a whole series of 5 or I think 6 now different labs that fit into a high school biology class that teach the same kind of core concepts that you would be needing to teach: osmosis, diffusion, on and on and on, cell transport, with a context of how this kind of work informs clinical applications. And it turns out it's really appealing to kids because, especially in the life sciences, and I would say especially for girls, the idea that the science that you're learning has an application in a helping profession or in a clinical setting makes it a lot more interesting, a lot more appealing to learn than if it's just like, here's the basic science and we're not really helping you understand how it maps. And so that's just one example, and we do a lot of teacher professional development. We provide lab kits so that you can do these labs, and we even have a coach who will go out and help you implement the lab the first time in your classroom, just to make sure you feel confident that it's going to go well. So as I said, a big part of what we do is professional development, often around these curriculum activities that we have created. And so we have a program called the Institute for STEM Teaching and Research at Northwestern, I-STAR at NU. It's kind of a catchy name. Again, the teachers can come in and sign up. We have, this is only 10 of them, but a whole menu of choices, and you can go onto our website and decide which of these you might want to sign up for. There's no cost to any of the programs to the teacher. And if there's an active project that we might actually, and if you're agreeing to do pilot testing in your classroom, we might actually pay you as the teacher a little bit of a stipend to help us implement that model. So not only is the district and school not paying, but often the teacher's earning a little bit of money, not a lot of money, but a little bit of money to compensate them for their time outside of the classroom to support this work. Yeah.
Do all of the institutes have a follow-up, are they all connected to a follow-up module that you are actively involved in, or are some of them just, this is the institute, good luck, or are all of these connected to an ongoing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some of them, they all start as some kind of funded research project, because that's how we work at the university. You don't do work unless you have funding. But what my office can do is kind of serve as a curation entity, like a librarian, if you will. And so even when the funding runs out, this is one thing that K-12 finds incredibly frustrating about working with the university is, they don't want to do something that's going to go away after a year or two, right? Because it's a big investment. The teachers, if they're going to come up to speed on it, they want to keep doing it year after year if it makes sense. And so it's really frustrating when the project goes dark and the funding dries up or goes away, and then there's nobody left to help them do it. And so we end up kind of keeping those programs going year after year. So, if we have one teacher who goes through and learns how to do these labs, and the other teachers at the school get really excited and they say, oh, that's awesome. Can we go and get trained on it next year? And there's nobody there to do it anymore. It stinks. And so we're there to do it year after year. So if we're in an active sort of project where our funding is active, then we can provide a lot greater level of resources. We're probably doing research on the project to figure out, is it working? What are kids learning? Are the teachers learning? So there's a lot more sort of surveying and evaluating going on. We might even come into the class with a grad student and do observations. How's this lab working? Afterwards, there's less of that. So afterwards, it's more of just, here's a great resource. If you want to come and get trained on it via PD, you can do that and then take it back. But there's less kind of hand-holding and follow-up afterwards just because we're not actively researching it anymore. It's kind of refined and packaged and kind of ready to go, and most of the kinks are worked out of it. Yeah. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Do you have outside evaluators as well, or are you doing it all in-house?
It depends. Sometimes the projects require that you have an external evaluator. It's usually not the case that the external evaluator actually shows up in a teacher's classroom, because that's at a level of detail that they don't really care about. So they'll come in and, review our work, our research, and kind of check on us, but not necessarily, go out and do firsthand observations, work with the teachers and stuff like that.
Are you doing program fidelity measures and things like that when you do that?
We tend not to be as worried about fidelity because we're not like a textbook publisher in that sense. And we also, I think, come from a position, this is a little bit more of a philosophical argument, but we come from a position that we treat our teachers as sort of partners, not as vessels to be filled with our beautiful knowledge. And so the idea of, fidelity to what exactly we told you to do isn't really part of our DNA as much as here's a resource, here's how we developed it and why, here's the scientists who did this research, but we respect your view on your kids and how it fits into your curriculum. And if you want to change it, knock yourself out,
Yeah, and that really
Yeah.
coming about from some of the discussions we've had with the multiple funding streams and multiple sort of project areas that we have going on, and things that are coming out of Department of Ed, at least the federal Department
That's
of
right.
Ed, have a huge fidelity component
That's right.
that they have to be looking at.
That's right, and that's not, that fidelity only matters when you're trying to lock everything down so you can evaluate it, right? Because then you don't want variation in the implementation. You want to say like, did this textbook work? Well, if you're not publishing textbooks and you're not trying to like do a scientific study and publish a paper, all you really care about is, are the kids enjoying that lesson and are they learning from it, and does the teacher feel like it's working for them in their classroom? And so, like I said, we're a lot less worried about that. I mean, obviously we care that the materials are good, and if we hear from the teachers that they stink, then we got to fix them. But that's more of the model that we have.
I don't want to take you too far off track, but.
I'm here to be, of service to you.
So I have a sense that you have 13 people who are housed in education, and they are, somewhat at the disposal of the teachers, that they're the ones kind of doing a lot of the intensive work and coaching and so on as a resource. At what point, or are there ever, the faculty who are actually in the science departments themselves, and if they're involved with the teachers or the students directly, does that ever happen at this stage where they go to these two-day institutes?
They sometimes do come, depending, these are not, these are a little bit heterogeneous. Just because they're on the same slide doesn't mean they're all the same thing. But like, for example, some of these things are research experiences where you're going in, the teachers are going into the labs for a week or 2 weeks or a month. And that's a whole different program than just going for a one-day professional development or half-day, whatever it is. So they tend to be kind of different things. But yeah, so if you're going into the lab, then yeah, you're meeting the faculty and their students and their postdocs, and you're working side by side with them. Some of them, later I'll show you another one where we also do a lot of piggybacking on research symposium that we're holding at the university. And so if there's a big event like climate change, or we just had that on Friday actually, where there's all these talks and different scientists are coming in, we'll bring like 10 or 15 teachers in and do some special programming around a research symposium that's already happening on campus, and then give them some ways to take that back to their classroom, So that's the kind of thing that we're doing. This is just a quick summary that shows our growth over the years in terms of the number of teachers that we serve. By and large, this is summer PD work that we do, but sometimes it's on Saturdays or whatever if we have some follow-up. So here's a good example. Like the one I was just telling you, this is not this year's because that was just Friday. I didn't have pictures yet, but previous years we did a climate change and sustainability series, and it was a whole mix of different things. There was workshops, there were some presentations by the faculty of, here's my research in a way that would make sense to the teachers. Different formats, where it was maybe less formal. You can just come in and have lunch with the faculty member and talk about stuff. Some research experiences, some lab tours. We also had the teachers come and then do some curriculum development. So the teachers themselves would come in and create some activities that they would take back to the classrooms and then share them out. So I think if you go to this site, you'll see like a whole library of activities that are teacher-developed activities, based on their experiences in this program, you know, each year. So we'll start off with like 5, and then we'll have 10 lessons and 15 activities. So we accumulate them over time as the teachers come through, but they all start from teachers. So it's not a foreign outsider kind of perspective on here's what you should do in your classroom. They're all teachers who think about, oh, I could do this with my kids. This would be really cool. So this is what I was telling you before, where we have a whole variety of different symposia on campus, and I couldn't tell you year to year what, they're not always predictable annual events. Sometimes they're one-off events, but when we have enough lead time, we'll try to figure out ways that we can bring teachers in to benefit from that experience. And then we'll have special like debriefing. So like during the lunch break, we'll have grad students come in and kind of help walk the teachers through some of the science that they have or might be hearing in the symposium and help them get ready for it. You know, so we understand that these are, you know, talks that are really at a different level, but we can sort of get you prepared to appreciate what the science is. And this is, you know, these symposium are like stuff that's not even in the journals yet. This is really the most cutting edge research that's happening, you know, today, right now in the field. Like the one on Friday was all about fracking, which is just emerging right now as a major research area. And teachers want to talk about it in their classes because the kids are asking, because it's in the paper. And, you know, they would get to hear from some of the latest emerging results from some of the fracking studies that are going on. So it's pretty interesting. Again, we do these research experiences. Sometimes we have partnerships from companies where they'll not only not really do a full research experience, but do more of a job shadowing, just so that when they have conversations with the kids in the classroom about like, what do I do with this content? They can say, well, let me tell you about some of the careers that, you know, folks that I was out in a corporate R&D lab, pharmaceutical lab, or whatever, and say, you could be a lab technician, you could do this, you could be a researcher. So it's a little bit more of a lightweight experience, but still a way to help them communicate with their students, like what do you do with this as a career, or what are some options out there? So one example that we're particularly proud of is a very deep partnership that we forged with the Lindblom Math and Science Academy, which is a CPS high school that's funded by Baxter. And the model here is that we actually have one of my staff who's half-time at this high school, every week, half-time, who runs professional development for the entire district. So it's not just training the teachers in that school, but that school serves as a hub for biotech training across the entire district. So it's a real kind of organic capacity building model where instead of constantly asking a district to rely on outside resources, we're housing that resource within the district itself, within the school, and the teachers from around the district are coming through for professional development. They can see how it looks in the classrooms at that school. So it's a really great model. There's a whole series of, you know, professional development opportunities that go through this. There's these loaner kits and also what we call Baxter boxes, which the teachers actually keep, that have like pipettes and all kinds of equipment that they might not normally have, that they actually get to take back and use to implement the labs that they learn about. And I think we've done something like 116 teachers from 87 different schools around the district who've come through the PD opportunities there. So I really like it because it's a model where we're growing that capacity organically within the school and within the district itself. So I'm going to switch gears and talk about an informal out-of-school program as well, just to kind of balance it out because I want to shortchange the out-of-school time. So one of the programs that we've been working on now is called Fuse. This is a program that we developed ourselves, but now are bringing faculty in from around the university to help us expand it and grow it. So we weren't doing something that was tied to one of their research labs or whatever, but when we know we have a need, we go and ask them to help us round out what expertise we have. You know, again, we're not expert on all sciences, and so if we need expertise, say, in solar energy, we'll go find the people working on solar energy and we ask them to help us. So Fuse is a kind of designed as a drop-in program for out of school, although it turns out that a lot of schools have been running it during the school day, which is fine. We just weren't really expecting that to happen. but we target kids who are kind of not that engaged in science. So a lot of the work we've done in classes were always for kids already enrolled in a biology class or whatever, but we asked ourselves, what could we do for the kids that aren't really that turned on to science? Could we get them hooked somehow and bring them in? And so we've been opening these, what we call Fuse Studios at public libraries, as after-school clubs, as summer camps, and again, we've got a cluster, one school district that's been putting it in all of their middle schools as well, which is kind of cool. And it consists of different fun challenges that kids can work on that level up kind of like a video game. So you start, each challenge has like level 1, it's pretty easy, and then if you finish that, you get to go up to level 2, you know, it's like Candy Crush or something like that, or Flappy Bird. And when the kids get it, because they understand how video games work, so it makes a lot of sense for them. You know, the grown-ups are like, what are you talking about? And they're like, oh no, you know, video game levels. And so each one is, you know, we have different areas. So like this one we did with the Chicago Architecture Foundation, and you get to do some 3D design and create your dream home. This is the one that we did some of the biotech stuff with, where you get to create these little beads and try to implant stuff in the beads. We do some 3D printing challenges where you can design some jewelry or some sunglasses or whatever you might want to do. But all of these require sort of basic sort of engineering skills, engineering design skills. So, you know, at the one hand, the kids think they're having fun, and the grown-ups in the room are like, oh, they're learning important stuff. It just doesn't really smell like school, so it's fun. We do some robotics. We do some partnerships with different companies. So we worked with Motorola to do like a user interface design for one of your mobile devices, because again, kids are really into their phones and their devices, but we wanted them to see that, you know, you could become a designer and work on this technology if you were really into it. So different fun things like that. So those are some in-school and out-of-school examples. One of the other things we do is sort of try to support and build the general capacity. So one of the funded programs is called G12. Oregon has now the second one here, right? And it places graduate students into schools. Everyone does it a little bit different. It's not like a monolithic model. The way we do it is we place a graduate student in a teacher's classroom for a full academic year. So it's like one teacher, one grad student partnered up the whole year. So we do a lot of matchmaking at the beginning to make sure it's a good fit. Here the model is different. It's a 2 or 3 week at a row stint in residence, which is cool but different. They not only do they support the instruction that's going on in that classroom, but also we expect them to create each semester an activity, a lab or an activity that they design and create and then run in the classroom under the teacher's guidance, of course, that brings some aspect of the research that they're doing as a grad student into the classroom. And most of them are around the idea of sort of computational thinking, computational modeling, since that's our focus for our program. And you know, the kids love it because those grad students aren't that old. You know, they're in their 20s and whatever, and so they're cool and hip. One of the ones that had one of the biggest impacts was in earth science, and she rode a longboard and would bring her longboard, you know, the skateboard, into class, and the kids are like, "What? You know, you're skateboarding?" And you know, so she was, you know, really kind of changing the image of what it meant to be a scientist without even really trying that hard. It was just, you know, who she was. So it was really pretty fun for them. Another course that we run online, so this is something that your teachers here could actually take advantage of, is, and this is the one that really started as a grassroots request from the districts, is a lot of schools wanted to create new opportunities for their students around doing independent research. So not an in-class activity necessarily, but you know, something that they might end up doing as a science fair project later, or you know, for Intel, or just an opportunity to conduct scientific research, which for those of us who do science education is really what it's all about. It's not following some recipe in your classroom lab. It's about thinking of your own idea, how are you going to tackle this, and you know, following the project all the way through. And a lot of the schools came to us and they said, you know, we don't really know how to get one of these things off the ground. we know that there's some other schools around town that do a really good job of this. It would be great if we had an opportunity to learn from them and incorporate their best practices. And that's what we created. We partnered with these sort of leading schools to create a course that helps both like a team of an administrator and like a science teacher or science department chair go through and think about how to create a program that works in their school. So there's not a cookie cutter model, but it's sort of a capacity building process to help you go through the planning process and think about how to do this. And we have, I think something like 84 teachers who've gone through this, including a bunch of teachers in California and Missouri and some other places as well. So it's completely an online course, and you get to meet and talk to other folks who are doing this kind of work. This isn't quite as exciting, but we have like laptop loaner programs, so a teacher can ask for a classroom set of laptops if they want to do something in their classroom for a month or two, and we'll loan it out to them and let them do whatever they want with it. Or if they're not sure what they want to do, they can come in for a professional development, and we'll help them kind of map it into what their curriculum is. One of the other things we do, again, even more sparsely, is if there's any unused equipment that is not being used in a university lab and they're just giving it away, we'll try to grab anything that works in a high school lab that we know is needed and get it placed there. So we have a little bit of success with this. I wouldn't say that we're total rock stars on this yet, but because not everything that comes out of a university lab is going to find a useful home. Sometimes it's really hard to maintain. Sometimes you have to hook it up to liquid nitrogen, which that's not going to work in a high school. So not everything works, but when we can find something good, then we'll try to route it over. And we just, this isn't a lab thing, but the library just got rid of a whole room full of PCs. And so we asked our local high school, do you guys want 25 Dells? And they said, sure, we'll put a new lab in, and we just routed it over there. So sometimes you get lucky and it works out like that. One of the other models that I want to kind of spend the last part of my time with is our local high school, which is in Evanston. So it's about 6 or 7 blocks from campus. The new president, well, he's not that new anymore, but our president came in at the university and said, I want to really do more in terms of partnering with our local high school, this one in particular. The Chicago is such a big district that you can't do this. They have like 100 high schools, so there's no way we could do this model, at that scale. But here we have one in town. All the kids in town go to the same high school. It's about 4,000 kids, so it's a big high school. But it's it's a very diverse community. So it's about 50% minority and low-income kids and 50% non-minority. We have the full spectrum. We have like super high flyer kids, and we have kids who are not even sure what they want to do after high school, including going on to college. So it's a very, very diverse group. And through the president's initiative, we launched a partnership office in the high school. So we have this purple office right here with all of our cool signs and stuff up on it. This is the president, this is the high school superintendent, and the mayor at our ribbon cutting. And this is the partnership coordinator, Kristen, who's in my office, who spends her full-time job is to be in this office and serve as that bridge. She's also a former high school science teacher, so she goes and does special coaching with the high school, with the science department for part of her time, but then the rest of her time is just bridging the high school, and it could be anything from athletics to drama to college counseling to just the whole spectrum of stuff. And we even at one point got a bunch of flyers up on the light posts outside of the high school that said Northwestern and Evanston, good neighbors, great partners, which was really great PR. And so like the Biotech Center, which is a sort of a deep investment in partnership with one school, this is one that we have with our local high school that's very, very deep. And I just wanted to share it with you as kind of the other end of the spectrum. If you really go deeply in terms of thinking about forging a partnership, one way to do it is to do this kind of a thing where you've got a person whose job it is to be the operator and connect the different cables of the community. And, you know, a teacher could just come to her at any point and say, I'm working on astronomy. You know, is there someone who can come help me with the lesson on black holes? And she'll try to figure out who to go to, you know, and find that resource and match them up. It's not that she's involved necessarily, but she'll try to be that matchmaker. So we should probably let people go if we're getting kind of late, but
Some of us
I'm
or hear your
glad to come back at any point. So, Brian, you know, Brian can be a great point of contact for that, and you know, if it makes sense, we're happy to come back and figure out how to do that.